awesome world that we're going to be living in today's debate, right? We have a lot of great technology. We're assuming that we have the technology to be able to clone individuals, right? And we're not talking about like just at Dolly the Sheep level, but like perfectly clone them. So we're not going to be having clones that are wandering around like with half-dead brains that won't operate properly, right? We're assuming this technology is effective. Second of all, right, we're assuming that we can relatively well detect like precisely what genes are related to what particular abilities of these individuals. And third of all, right, we think that we're going to be able to effectively calculate along a utilitarian calculus if this, like cloning this particular individual is going to be good for society as a whole, right? So we're not saying that we can be sure that it's good for the clone as an individual, like either the person who's being cloned or the clone that then comes, but we can be sure that if we clone this person, that is going to be good for society as a whole. So how are we setting up this mechanism, right? Like we recognize the fact that what we're taking is just the genetic material and that circumstances might be different in the way that that clone grows up. However, we think that we're able to relatively effectively try and make sure this individual grows up, no thank you, under the right circumstances, that they will be able to reach their full potential, right? The types of people that we're looking at cloning are going to be individuals that have specific skills that we think are important to society, but that we might have a slight like shortage of under the status quo, e.g. brain surgeons, mathematicians, military strategists, cancer researchers, like individuals that we might need in society in order to provide things that are very, very good, but it's very difficult for us to train up people to that level without having that the preconditions of the potential to reach that kind of like genius status to do good things for society, right? Next important point about mechanism is that we're willing to do this with or without the consent of the individual who's being cloned, right? We think basically what we're doing is we're nationalizing the gene pool. We're saying the state now like owns your genetics. I'm going to explain later in my speech why we think that individuals don't have a right to their own genetic material. And like the last point to say on this is that this is all going to be done by like an independent committee, but it is set up by the state, right? So we're not privatizing this. It's going to be nationalized, but it's going to be like independent. There's going to be plenty of oversight. I hope that's all relatively clear. Are there any clarifications on the mechanism? Awesome. So what am I going to be looking at in my speech? First of all, I'm going to tell you why we're going to be taking a utilitarian metric in this debate and justifying that. Second of all, I'm going to tell you why we're willing to like violate these rights of these individuals in the society for the good of broader society. I'm going to explain to you why we actually need this in society, why these benefits are essential, and lastly, I'm going to tell you some stuff about why we don't think people have a right to their own genetic material. So first of all, right, utilitarian calculus. Because note that we're not necessarily saying in this debate that we want to normalize cloning as something that everyone's doing, right? That's why we're limiting it purely to this like one arm of the state. We're strictly using it to benefit society as a whole, not as like some kind of like fun thing that you can do on your weekend. And we're going to be doing this under this utilitarian metric, like I already explained. We think we're very capable in this debate of calculating whether that's going to be a good thing or not. Why do we think that the utilitarian metric is the right one for this debate? First of all, note because like we think that basically the kinds of rights that we afford to individuals, such as rights over their own genetic material or rights to consent to things or not, are almost always based on utilitarian and practical like justifications of those outcomes, right? So we think that broadly, if we can show to you that we're going to get enough benefits for society as a whole as a result of this policy, that is going to be enough of a justification to overcome the rights of these individuals, right? Second of all, we think that there are numbers of cases in society in which we already violate the rights of individuals for the good of broader society, i.e. the fact that we have conscription in many countries, the fact that we declare war on other individuals to gain our own other states rather, for our own goals. But also, like, the very systems that we live in within our society, namely democracy and capitalism, right? So in the case of democracy, every time that you pass a law through parliament, you are necessarily violating the preferences and rights of other individuals who are not part of the majority that has, like, passed that law. Or the idea that we have a capitalist system that necessarily, like, relies on certain individuals in society staying poor in order for the benefits of others. So we actually think that this is the sort of thing we do all the time. We don't have a problem with that. Second of all, though, no thank you. Second of all, we would note that we think that individuals who have specific talents and skills and ability to contribute to society actually have a responsibility to exercise those skills in a way that are beneficial for society. So, for example, if you look at politicians, whilst we might note that politicians consent to becoming politicians in the first place, once they're already in the public sphere, they have no meaningful ability to then opt out of that. But because we recognise they have that skill set to govern society, they know specific things, we expect more of them than we do other individuals. That applies to a lot of other experts we see in society as well. That applies to recruiting specific people for security services and so on and so forth. I'll take a point from quiz.
assuming you're an adult and you discover that the only reason your parents has ever had you as a child was for you to be an organ donor for your brother, how would you feel about that?
Yeah, so that moves me nicely onto the second part that I want to talk about, which is what happens in this specific case, and what about the rights of these individuals who are being cloned. First of all, we recognize, right, that obviously there's a chance that some of these individuals are going to have unhappy lives. We also think some of these individuals will also have happy lives, right? We think that we are less sure about the quality of the life of the people being cloned than we are sure about the broad benefits we can have to society as a whole. So on the scale of probability, it's more likely the world will be better on our side. But second of all, right, we don't accept the premise that these clones won't have happy lives. They're going to have the best of everything. They're going to be well taken care of. They're going to be trained up in a way, and they're going to have meaningful lives where they're achieving things for the good of society. How many people can say, right, that they... No, thank you. How many people can say that they're going to be able to have a life where they can, work to research to cure cancer or something like this? We actually think that the fact that these individuals are able to help society on the whole is going to mean that they're going to have a better life. So that moves me on to the next thing about benefits and why this policy is necessary. We recognize that there are a number of things in our society, a number of problems that we need to solve, which we simply can't do under the status quo because we simply lack the people who have the intelligence, the resources, the ability to do things like solve cancer, to do things like ensure that we don't go to war again. We think that there have always been brilliant individuals in our history that have done huge things for society, that have changed the way that we perceive our society in the future, and we'd like to have more of those people. We're not even sure what the benefits could be in this debate because the scope of what they could be is completely unthinkable, but we think they could be absolutely huge. The last thing to say, is we don't think that people necessarily have the right to hold on to this genetic material, and the reason we're happy to nationalise it is because we think that in the first place it's not something that they made themselves, it's something that they inherited from their parents, it's something that was passed on to them, and it's not something that they've particularly done anything personally in order to develop, you're out of order, in order to develop or improve it in any sort of way, so we don't see any reason why they should have more possession over it than the state should have in that case. Because we think this is going to lead to huge benefits, because we think it's principally justified, and because we think the world will look pretty fucking cool after we implement this policy, please propose.
I would like to thank the Prime Minister for that speech and call upon the Leader of the Opposition to open the case for the opposition side.
So we did not ask for a clarification from OG because we think their definition is clear, but we reject it. The reason we reject it is because nowhere in the motion does it say that we can predict all of the future of humankind and say that on balance it will be better. Moreover, there are philosophical questions on what is the best for humanity, and supposedly their machine now also solves all philosophical questions of what is right and wrong. So we reject that. We think that they can clone great people. We accept that they will be genetically superior, that they will correlate to those abilities, but we reject everything that they said about this magic ability to predict how the world will look and what is better than other people. Moving on this I'll have three main points. One is why they won't live up to the expectations and what will be the consequences of that. Two, why the classes, they'll create classes and will devalue the value of human life. And lastly, where our moral red lines stand and why this crosses them 10 times over. But let's first talk about what we've just heard. So first they said, here's why you should look at utilitarian, we should use a utilitarian approach. Why? The only reason is because we always do it. Except that we don't always do it. We don't do human experiments, for example, even if we can kill some people and save many lives. We don't, for example, enslave some people, even if they're very, very effective, by the way, which is kind of what we're about to do. Enslave people, even if they'll be very, very effective, just to make a lot more people happy. We don't kill people and take away their organs just because it's fun. Note that we don't have analysis why it should be utilitarian, other than utilitarian analysis. But so we just don't accept this argumentation at all. Also worth mentioning, we'll also win on the utilitarian clash, but just to make sure that you know that this isn't only a utilitarian debate. Secondly, they said, look, these kids might have a good life. We're going to explain to you in great detail why they will not have a great life. They will have a terrible, miserable life. And we think that we can predict that much better than what will happen to all of humanity through their magical machine. Lastly, they said, oh, they don't know their genetics because they didn't make it. They inherited it. This is true for every human right? They didn't make their body, they inherited their body. So people have no right over their body, and the government can do with that whatever they want. We just feel that logic is. Moving on to why they won't live up to the expectations. Note that what a person achieves is a mixture of many things. It includes his genetic makeup. But it also includes the adversity that he has faced, right? The fact that, for example, Einstein was rejected by the scientific community helped him to escape those same ideas and move us forward. The fact that they had specific circumstances, right? Even identical twins or brothers who have very, very similar or sometimes identical genes end up in very, very different places. It also depends on luck. It depends on the right time, right? Einstein was a great relativistic physicist, but he did not accept and did not understand quantum physics. If you would have cloned Einstein today, he would not have done the great achievements that he has. Why is that important? Because we have two very important and very different consequences from that. One is, we won't give this cool, crazy advancement to humanity. We think they will be, tend to be clever. They'll tend to be more athletic, and so on. We think that's great. It's like having children of those, we can ask awesome people to have children. We can also give kind of these correlations. But we won't have this huge amount of advances that they hope we will have. But secondly, this means that these people will lead terrible lives. And why is that? Because A, they are supposed to be similar to people we know they're supposed to be similar to these great people who very few have ever achieved their amount of achievements, and B, everyone knows exactly who to compare them to and how. They know exactly how great they have to be. Note that even little brothers of small, awesome brothers like Omer sometimes feel that the fear of not living up to those expectations can bring you down and scare the shit out of you. This is so much worse. Note also that despite what I've just explained to you about why clones are not identical, that is not how people perceive that. Note that when people say clones, they think it is the same person. They think he is capable of doing the same things. That is why this motion is not about asking awesome people to have children, because it feels to us incredibly different if a person is a clone. They are the same person, so their expectations from them will be very high, but as I've explained to you, they won't be able to live up to that same expectations. Closing.
If we clone Picasso, he will probably not paint Cubist. However, he will still paint beautifully. He will paint something else, and we will know that the next cloned artist is likely to paint something different.
Yes, if you genetically choose the people who are born, they will be better genetically. That is a terrible, terrible thing. It won't lead to another Picasso, it won't lead to another Einstein. Let's talk about what genetically choosing the people who are born will lead to. Now we're trying to talk about classes and the devaluing human life. Note, this is eugenics with a high-tech twist. Okay? What we're doing is we're saying we're taking people that we perceive to be innately better because we suppose that their genetics dictates their lives and saying these are the people we want to be better. One difference is that we'll have a larger difference between them and other people, so we now know, so there's a bigger genetic difference between people born in this method and other methods. But B, everyone knows exactly who they are, right? Because it isn't this genetic random thing that we don't know every day. Everyone knows if you were born through this method or were not born through this method. We think that this is what will create a racist society. We think that this is inherently what racism is all about, right? When racism talk about, African Americans being less intelligent or women being incapable of doing these things, right? The problem with racism is not that there is never any correlation between genetics and people's features. The problem is that once you start discussing that, once it becomes evident, when it becomes part of our culture, we start treating people as if they cannot make anything beyond. Even racist people, let's say 50, 100 years ago, knew that some African Americans could learn to read and write, could be good professionals, and some white people could be worse. But the fact that everyone was reminded every single day that they are genetically tend to, that they are supposed to be better, that they are usually better, meant that many people did not even get a chance to prove their full potential. We think it is terrible to make some people somewhat genetically better than others, and we think that's a huge harm. Lastly, let's talk about moral red lines. We think that a very important moral red line that we never pass is that we never use a human as a tool. And let me clarify. It's not that we don't use a human in any way as a tool, but not as a full human being. His full life is a tool for us. So we can have workers, but we will never make life-threatening experiments on human beings, no matter what the practical benefits for centuries to come. And why is that? Because A, we are less certain, because we don't have our magic machine, we are less certain about the advantages relative to the horrors that we are doing to these people, and we've explained to you why we're causing them to have a terrible life. And secondly, because we think that the mere fact that we are now using people as tools, the mere fact that there are people now that we can treat them as objects, that their lives don't matter, causes huge damage to our society. It causes us to perceive human life as less important, to perceive types of people as less important. We think we will never cross this red line. We think that human experience would have better results than this policy. We don't do them, we won't do this. Please oppose.